Hey guys, I wanted to do a quick video on a topic related somewhat to a current topic with war. And what I've been researching for a video, for like a top 10 list type video, because on my channel I've kind of divided out my videos into this talks format, which is what this video is, where I just turn on the camera and just start talking. Don't do a lot of editing. It's not fully researched and all those sort of things. Versus the docs, which are my longer form, typically longer form videos that are fully researched, and I do a lot more editing. Those take a lot longer to make. And then I've done one so far, but I've also got a tops Objectivum lists. So like a top 4, top 10 type list. Anyways, what I was intending to do is top 10 reasons for war, top 10 reasons that humans go to war historically. The problem with it is I haven't found a whole lot of literature that really is concrete on this. And I found one thing that's interesting, and I thought about just running with it, but I really can't do that if I'm going to be true to the definition of this channel, which is, seeking the truth and objective discussions. So, anyways, this is the Wikipedia article for war, and these are the theories behind the motivation for war. And there's a lot of different theories, and there's no real consensus. No consensus about which are the most common. Yeah, evolutionary is one, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this one. Psychoanalytic, Marxist, demographic, Malthusian. Don't know what some of this stuff is. Cultural rationalist. There's a lot of different theories on what's the main driver behind humans constantly going to war, because you don't see a whole lot of other species that do this. However, one of our close relatives on the evolutionary tree is chimpanzees, and they have shown some interesting group combat type stuff. We'll talk about that very shortly here. Anyways, yes, that's the channel. I was going to do this video. I'm deciding against trying to do a longer form video on this because I just don't have enough concrete evidence. Again, this is another thing. This is Encyclopedia Britannica website. Talks about some of the different theories behind what causes war. And this one says that war is divided into two main categories: innate biological, just that we're hardwired to go to war, basically is one theory, and the other is just psychological factors. One of the few, as far as I know, we're the only species that is fully conscious, although there's some debate there. And there's even some species that we have thought historically were didn't think in any sort of way. There's some conscious being detected, basically. Like, for instance, with trees, they have found that there's communication going on through the root systems of the trees in response to certain things that are happening in their environment. So in a way, you could argue maybe that is a conscious being in that tree. Obviously a very simple form of consciousness, but what is consciousness? That's an entire other debate, and that's also a very unsettled bit of science. We're not going to get into all that, obviously, but because we're very high up in terms of our consciousness, we have the ability to do more complex things like warfare. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's biological, maybe it's psychological. We don't really know. But what I did find interesting while I was searching for all this, I've used Our World in Data a lot, and this website has just fantastic research, fantastic data. And in their War and Peace section, they say they're currently working on a data set on conflicts, death, and casualties. So this could be interesting. Maybe they come up with what is the most common reason that historians have given attached to different wars historically. That's kind of what I was looking for. What's the most common reason? Was it for territorial gain? Was it for religious purposes? Was it to spread your like the U.S. has tried to spread democracy, and Russia tried to spread communism during the Cold War. There was a ton of different wars that surrounded that historically. But what has been the most common? To me, it's probably territorial, especially when you go way, way back. I think it was probably territorial back in the day. And because of, obviously early on in human civilization, there was no religion. So, humans have been around without religion probably longer than they have been around with religion. So probably a lot more territorial warfare than anything else. And this is one thing I thought about rolling with this piece of evidence here and kind of tallying everything up and doing the video. The problem is I don't know who wrote this. I think it was somebody, Arwa Immerse, whoever that is. I think it's some student at some university is what I think it is. And it's well cited. They use a lot of citations. That this Chris Hedges book is a very popular book. I've read part of this book, and it's very interesting. I mean, but it never really talks about, what's the most common reason for war, which is what I was looking for. But it's a well-cited book. It's some sort of university research paper is what I think. But they never really list where they get this chart from. And if I knew where this chart from and I could verify the source, I could probably actually use this for my video. But the other problem I have with this source is I did kind of go through and tally everything up. And when I was tallying everything up to see, because these are based on different time frames, when I was tallying everything up, I noticed some of these categories are just, to me, are basically the same. Like a rebellion and a civil war, war of insurgency, rebellion, kind of the same thing. To me, I don't know that there's a huge difference between the two. I don't know how this person separated those out. Dissemination of ideas and beliefs and religious disputes, kind of similar. Forceful expansion of political ideologies and dissemination of ideas and beliefs, kind of similar. I don't know how they separated those things out. But one thing I did notice with this, very early recorded human history was still mostly about territorial and cultural expansion, which is, like I said, we didn't have religion back then. You didn't have a lot of other things. Apparently rebellions and dominating trade was another, because trade early in human history was very vital, very vital. And, countries that dominated trade, groups that dominated trade were extremely wealthy back then. So I could see wars being over trade routes and things like that back then. And then we shift, and then religion comes into play, and then it becomes all about religion for a while. And territorial expansion and cultural expansion is still there, and rebellions are still there. And then we get more modern history here. 1700s through the 1800s, and you get disseminated ideas and beliefs is dominant here. So I suppose maybe they're talking about, to me, maybe that's I don't remember when the Crusades were. I think they were before that. I don't remember exactly when those were, but I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about here. It's civil wars, yeah. Yep, we had some of those. And territorial cultural expansion is still hanging in there, and even in the modern history here, 1900s and the 2000s here, it's still territorial expansion. Religious disputes is hanging in there still, but religion has kind of died out in terms of we're not going to war strictly for religion anymore. So we've evolved there. Civil wars still are a thing. And then political ideology, and to me this is probably, and this makes sense because that was the Cold War and Russia and the U.S. doing their thing, Russia trying to force communism, us trying to force democracy, which, I mean, it's just stupid. Let people have whatever government they want to have. Let the citizens of the country choose their government. But that's I'm sidetracking already here. So anyways, I thought about rolling with this. But it's just, I don't know where this came from, and too many overlapping categories to how do you really say territorial and cultural expansion is the number one all time, when if you combine dissemination of ideas and beliefs with forceful expansion of political ideologies, then that would be number one, because they're very similar. Or rebellions and civil wars would, tick up quite a bit. It still wouldn't be number one, but I just couldn't find enough information on it. But getting back to this is something very interesting. If you've never read anything about this, just type this into YouTube. There's 1,000 videos on it. I'm not going to do a video on this because it'll get drowned out, and my videos already don't rank very well, and so many people have done videos on this. There's no point in me even attempting to do a video on this because it won't be in the top like 5 pages and it won't get any views, which none of my videos get views yet anyways, so I guess that doesn't matter. But it's an interesting thing. Like I said, watch some videos on it, read through this. But this was heavily documented by Jane Goodall when she was at this in Tanzania. She was at this chimpanzee, it's like a Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania. Yeah, so anyways, they heavily researched this. They even gave like names to all the different participants, and this was a brutal like war that lasted for like 4 years between these two basically like tribes of chimpanzees. Basically some of these chimpanzees I think that were in maybe this tribe kind of left and started a tribe up here. It was down here, I don't remember which, and that pissed off the main tribe, and they went to war over it. And in the end, I think all the male participants were dead from both tribes, and one tribe ended up winning. I think it was the Kasakala that won, and then they eventually took over all like a lot of this territory, and then another tribe went to war with them, and then they pushed them back out of that territory. So it was interesting. It's very interesting that, you know, these are the only type of animals, you know, other than humans that we have seen that actually go to war, like organized warfare with their own species. It's a very interesting thing. And I've heard about this years ago, but when I was doing research for this, I kind of went back through a lot of this again, and it's very cool, kind of cool thing that they documented all of this. And then this kind of ties into this kill rate theory. This is another thing, and this is about the human evolution side of warfare, and that interpersonal aggression was the driving force behind evolution. So, interesting theory. I don't know. I guess they're saying that because we were so aggressive, that's why we evolved. I don't know. I don't know exactly what they mean by that. But according to their ancestors, they were distinguished by their greater aggressiveness. Yeah, our ancestors were very aggressive, like chimps we've seen. And yes, humans have a lot more aggression towards their own species, even to this day, even with warfare down, although warfare has ticked back up recently. But even with warfare down, compared to historical norms, we still do a lot more murder type stuff than any other species out there, other than chimpanzees and some other like apes and monkeys do. That's kind of interesting. So yeah, this is getting back to the beginning. So anyways, I was going to do a longer form like list video for this, but I just can't do it because I don't have good enough information. And it just seems like there's just no consensus from experts on what most common causes are. I think probably the most common cause is territorial expansion, which what I find interesting about this is that was the most common thing way back here, very early human history, recorded history. And in modern history, that has not been a common thing, although I really think this Ukraine war, obviously he has said he's in there to denazify and do all this crazy stuff. Really, he wants the territory, right? It's territorial expansion is what it is, and he talked about in that speech that he wants to, that's rightful Russian lands, basically, is what he said. So to me, the number one, and the other thing is like every war I think has multiple reasons that people get into the war. So it's not just obviously territorial or cultural expansion. You could say political ideology too, because they want democratic, they want favorable to the West. Obviously, that's part of his motivation. Ideas and beliefs, you could put that in there. Trade, you could make an argument there because Ukraine does have a lot of natural resources, and he'd like to have control of that. So, and to some extent, the civil war there, that's what he cites. He's going in there to help, especially when he went into the Donbass originally, was to kind of put down the rebellion there, or not so much that, but to he was claiming that Ukrainians were shelling civilians there, which may or may not have been true. I'm not sure on that part of it, but anyways, I just find it interesting that we've come full circle now, and we now have a guy that's main thing is this territorial and cultural expansion. I just found that kind of interesting. So I'm going to leave it at that. 15-minute video. We'll leave it there. It's an interesting subject. I learned a little bit. Hopefully you learned a little bit with my rambling. We'll see you guys in the next video. Later.